Okay, welcome. We are back.
Is that the topic is icky, right? We're talking rodents. We're talking cockroaches, E. coli, salmonella, listeria. These are all
a committee made up of the third-party representatives, an operations representative, someone from QA, quality assurance, that all came together. And if there was a concern about a standard or how it was graded, they had the opportunity to appeal it. Sometimes we would reverse the score and give the points back. And other times it was, unfortunately, like we met on it.
Right. Your cooler broke down. It's Friday afternoon. It's your rush period. All your food is out of temp. All of it. Right? Do you throw it out as the food safety rules say? Or do you use it because you cannot pass up that Friday night rush? That Friday night rush might be 33% of your week's sales.
With Hot Perspectives, the show, I am thrilled to have my guest, Kat. Well, I call her Kat, Catherine Bedard, here today. And Kat and I have known each other for about 10 years. We used to work at the same spot, and we were cubicle mates right across from each other. And something I really valued about Kat was, her ability to challenge me, to open my eyes to other perspectives. And she's just a natural educator. You just share your knowledge. You're not a gatekeeper. And so when I was thinking about my next guest to bring on the show to talk about a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, which is food safety, quality assurance in restaurants, because in franchising, over 50% of the franchise models out there are restaurants. I didn't want anybody else to come on to talk about this topic but you. And so thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to give it over to you to introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about the work that you do in the franchising space, and then we'll get into it.
I'm honored to have been invited. So I'm a food safety professional, a sustainability professional. I'm become an honorary ops leader as well. And I always like to learn, grow, and in turn teach as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, where should we start? I guess since it's your first time on the show, we should probably talk about how things are done around here. First things first, we like to keep the conversation honest, open, transparent. And the way that we get to do that is we don't talk about brands. We're not here to mention any brands, and we don't represent any brands. And that way, it's just your opinion, my opinion, our experience that we're bringing to the people. Right? We have this little baggie here. Can't forget the red baggie. And this is where we dive into the questions. We spent about 15-20 minutes on each question. And I'm ready to get into it if you are.
I'm totally ready.
All right. I'm gonna give it a good shake. So you'll pick the question and I'll read it out. Okay. Okay. This is a staple question in all the shows. I've never had it first, but here we go. How can franchisors and franchisees benefit from courageous conversations on food safety? And even though we don't usually get this question first, I think it is actually a great way to start the conversation, because food safety is one of those topics that sometimes can feel uncomfortable to talk about. So I'd love your take on how and why franchisors and franchisees can benefit.
You're absolutely right. There's lots of room for courageous conversations in food safety. And I think the first aspects, ground level about food safety, is that the topic is icky, right? We're talking rodents. We're talking cockroaches, E. coli, salmonella, listeria. These are all very icky things. So if we cannot find the courage to even talk about them, how will we ever be able to fight them and mount a defense against them, because it is a defense. Rodents want to come in, cockroaches want to come in, E. coli, listeria, salmonella, and so on. They all want to come in. So it's defense. So if you can't talk about it, you can't fight it. Then there is the personal aspect to it.
Yeah.
Through my job, I've found that there's a part of food safety that feels more personal than other parts of the job. Here's what I mean by that. If you start a new role in a restaurant, someone's going to teach you how to operate this commercial fryer. Someone's going to teach you how to input an order in a POS. Someone's going to teach you how to schedule the shifts for the week, next week, if you're at that level. None of these are things you do at home. But at home, you kind of probably wash your hands.
Yeah.
You kind of probably do some rotation in your fridge, in your pantry. But the way you're supposed to do it at a restaurant isn't quite the same way as you would do it at home. So it feels personal when things go wrong. And what I mean by that is most franchise systems have third-party audits that verify food safety and some operational concepts. So when that audit doesn't pass or doesn't have a good score, it feels personal to the team. It feels like, wait, you auditor, you QA leader are telling me that the restaurant is dirty? That makes me feel like you're accusing me, the person, of being filthy, right? It hurts. It goes deep. And then people get either disengaged or defensive and aggressive about it, right? It can go sideways.
Quickly.
Yeah. Whereas if you make a mistake ordering an order like putting in an order in the POS, it doesn't hurt that much. It doesn't hurt your feelings as much. So this is where courage definitely comes in. There needs to be courage to state this for what it is. There's a difference with what you do at your house and what we do in the restaurant. In the restaurant, we do it this way because we have to look after a whole population, including people that are vulnerable, the elderly, children, pregnant women, people that are immunocompromised. And that's why the food safety rules exist the way they do. Yeah. So there's courage in those conversations. Yeah. And that means courage to speak it and courage to receive that conversation as well.
I want to pause you there for a second because I think you said something really key, which is it's going to feel personal. And I think that's important to acknowledge because especially if you're a business coach or if you have a relationship with the person that you have to give that feedback to, or worse yet, if you don't have a relationship with that person and you are just considered the auditor or the officer that's coming in to, lay down the law, it's hard sometimes to say the hard thing. It doesn't matter how you package the thing. It will still feel personal. And so sometimes when you go back and you say it's not personal. Well, it feels personal. Yep. And it's important, I think, to acknowledge that piece so that you can bring humanity into the conversation and bring facts into the conversation and even acknowledge and say, I know this might feel personal, but it's not. I don't intend it to be. These are just the areas that are of a concern, and this is why. Yeah, I think it's also courage is not a practice that, in my opinion, by definition, excludes emotions from the picture. Quite the reverse. Courage is having the capability of acknowledging current, future, possible emotions, reactions, and still doing what's it anyway. Right. Yes. Auditors, this happened. We trained them on this. Well, the ones I've overseen, I trained them on soft skills. I've trained them on delivering a hard information, but coding it in a way that is acknowledging the reality of the human receiving this information, right? Third-party audits, a lot of them are unannounced. Yeah. So you kind of have to tailor your feedback based on who's here today. Is it the restaurant manager or is it
the shift leader that started 3 days ago. You kind of have to modulate with that. And auditors often need like a lot of coaching themselves on this, about how to deliver that information. A feedback that people have given me in my career as a QA leader is, wow, you're so brave giving all that information, right? So they think I'm tough.
Yeah.
They think I'm bulletproof. And I say, no, I get the willies. When I have to raise this information, it doesn't make me feel good. I do have discomfort in the moment to have to raise the fact that, oh my goodness, this restaurant is overrun with rodents or cockroaches. It doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel bad. But I know that on the other side of that conversation, the good will come, right? Because then we can work at a system of like, how can we together in this restaurant do better? Right.
And that's such an important piece, because it's not just identifying that there's a problem. It's also, let's work on a solution. And I think sometimes when you are delivering that hard feedback, or when you have to have a conversation that, let's be honest, sometimes can result in closing a restaurant temporarily, right? Knowing that you're not just coming to identify a problem, but you're also there to help with the solution is, I think, a big part of what can help you find that courage and make it a little bit more comfortable of a conversation.
In the end, there's one of the best parts of my role as a food safety leader is that there is a North Star, right? In the end is what we're doing right now achieving the outcome of customers remaining safe. That's it. That's all. So in true concern, the safest restaurant is one that never serves food and has no humans in it. So that's not a business model. But in the end, is closing this restaurant down right now the right answer to keeping customers safe? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. So you kind of have to just always go back to this North Star, and along the way, explain why you got there. And then that builds trust, right? People are like, oh, I understand where this courage comes from. And then hopefully it gets contagious.
Yes.
When I model.
The good kind of contagious.
Yes. So courageous, contagious courage. Because then when I model courage, area coaches, organization leaders, restaurant managers can feel more comfortable
picking up the phone and saying, hey, I think we might have.
And just the concept of I need help.
Yeah.
Just that takes a lot of courage. Yeah. So when an organization, when people demonstrate it, other people pick it up because they see the outcome is like, wow, I raised my hand. I got some help. Things got better.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned training, and that you often lean on training with whether it's coaches or third party. Because even if you're a brand and you're using a third-party provider for your audits or for your compliance, ongoing compliance for your restaurants, you still need to be involved in the training. You still should be involved in how we do things, how we deliver messages, what are our own brand standards when it comes to.
Yep.
So can you share a little bit about what training could look like for a brand that's looking to close the gap on maybe food safety, or how to specifically coach for the courageous parts? And I know you mentioned soft skills, and people generally call it soft skills, but ain't nothing soft about it. Ain't nothing soft about it. It's really the human skills. It's the connection skills. It's the influencing skills that really make the difference. So I'd love to hear some tips on training.
You mean training auditors or training restaurant teams?
More so on whether it is restaurant teams or whether it's auditors. It's the piece about courageous conversations and the courage to speak up about something when you see it, even if it means, again, sitting in the discomfort.
Yeah, I think courageous conversations are always going to be easier for someone to initiate if they have a sense of how they will be received on the other end. And so I'll give you an example. I had created for one of my past brands kind of a book of like when push comes to shove, food safety, right? Your cooler broke down. It's Friday afternoon. It's your rush period. All your food is out of temp. All of it, right? Do you throw it out as the food safety rules say? Or do you use it because you cannot pass up that Friday night rush? That Friday night rush might be 33% of your week's sales, right?
Yeah.
So push comes to shove, what do you do? So and then creating that booklet, I found out that some franchise owners were like, well, obviously, Kat, we're going to throw out the food from the walk-in cooler. We're going to close the restaurant because we can't serve anything. Like, obviously, I'm like, okay, great. For some of them, it's not obvious. They're like, oh, really? You want me to close?
Throw this all out? Yeah.
But even for the ones that it was obvious, at least to the leadership of that franchise organization, I said, do your teams know that this is your values? They might think that what's the most important thing to you is the dollars. Yeah. And they might have that baggage from where they worked before. Another place that they worked before that made them use expired food or that made them use out of temp food. So only when you communicate, hey, this is our franchise organization. These are our values. We will value our customers' health before any dollars, right? You have to state it out loud. You can't just expect that your teams are going to assume that.
I like that because it can't just exist in a document. It has to live in the culture of the restaurant. Yeah.
And so when the team member, the shift leader has already been kind of onboarded in that culture of like, we value our customers' health more than the mighty dollar, obviously to a point, if, then it'll be easier for them to pick up the phone on that Friday at 3:30 and say, I'm very sorry to inform you, but the walk-in cooler completely died 2 hours ago. Everything is out of temp.
Yeah.
They're going to know that you already have it together.
Yes.
Because if not, they're going to be scared that you're going to yell at them and say, use it all or something like that. So I think that's where the courageous conversation starts from an organization point of view is you have to signal that you're ready to receive it.
Yeah.
Franchisor and franchisee. On that note, I think, and I've seen a lot of third-party audit systems.
Yes.
Some of them, by my own opinion, go too far in their standards or in their application. And so I really recommend that franchisees, if that's what they feel, they raise it to the franchisor. Have the courage to raise it and say, listen, this standard or its application does not fulfill the end result, which is to monitor true food safety, right? Because people circumvent it this way, or it is misunderstood this way. And as a program manager, there are I could say at least a dozen times that I've changed a standard or its application from feedback from the franchisees. Because when I created that standard or helped implement it from my head office, it made sense on paper. But when someone explained it to me saying, this is not how real life goes, it actually goes this way, or this thing is counterintuitive to what you think is going on, then I said, aha, I don't want my assessment to be just a book paper.
Yes.
It's supposed to be an assessment of real life food safety. So have the courage to raise it to your franchisor. They might be surprised at first.
I love that. I love that you mentioned the importance of that feedback loop because sometimes, and I'm going to say the thing, franchisors think that they know it all and they have all the answers for all the things. And even with the best intentions sometimes, what you intend doesn't necessarily always equal the impact of the thing. The theory doesn't always equal the reality of the thing. And so opening up that channel of feedback to say, okay, we made this standard change, or we've decided we're going to prioritize this thing for this season. How is it actually working out? If I implemented a standard and out of 50 restaurants, 40 of them are failing this standard, it's worth looking at the standard. It's worth asking the questions instead of saying we have a problem in 40 of our stores. Sometimes it is going back to the standard and just taking a harder look at it and getting that feedback from the field.
Yeah.
And I know there was an organization that I worked for as well. They had a committee made up of the third-party representatives, an operations representative, someone from QA, quality assurance, that all came together. And if there was a concern about a standard or how it was graded, they had the opportunity to appeal it and say, hey, this is why I don't think this was a fair assessment. And we would collectively come together. I think it was once every 2 weeks or so. We would come together and discuss the things. Sometimes we would reverse the score and give the points back and issue an official statement like, this is the reason why we're giving back this point. And other times it was, unfortunately, like we met on it and the end result is this is going to stick. And this is why.
Yep.
But at least having the channel there to welcome the feedback, to have the conversations, it again feeds into the culture of courageous conversations, being able to talk about the hard stuff and being able to get the perspectives, I think, sometimes that you need when it comes to food safety.
I agree. That type of committee, and I've been on them as well. And even recently in kind of a bit of like a restructuring and basically outsourcing of certain tasks in the food safety management world, the one thing I kept on my plate is participation in those appeal committees that had an ops rep, a franchisee rep, an auditor rep, and myself, because I felt like that was where I kept my finger on the pulse the most about what was going on in real life. Because you're right, sometimes we meet together, we discuss, we return to point, we explain why. Sometimes it's like, it's just flat out, you were absolutely right. Sometimes it's like, in this specific circumstance, we will grant it and here's why. Sometimes it's we will not grant it and here's why. But sometimes even the appeals that don't get granted give us another look of like, maybe we haven't trained our restaurants properly on this. Maybe we need to retrain our auditors on this, right? Because there's a set of expectations that is
collaboration.
That is an unwritten rule.
Calibration. That calibration.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought of all the things that I outsourced, like other stuff like reports and performance management, this one I kept active participation in because I wanted to know. I think the other thing about that is, again, courageous conversations are easier when you know the receiver is ready. And an example I can have, I had several area coaches on speed dial at all times that I could call and say, hey, what do you really think about this? How is this part of your ops really going in real life most of the time? And
you taking those temperatures every 2 hours, or are you just filling in the thing?
And they wouldn't mind telling me the truth. Because they know I wouldn't blow up at them. They know I wouldn't retaliate against them. And so because I created a culture of like their real feedback was valued, then they kept giving it to me. And it was always very insightful. Again, like those few standards that I eventually adjusted over time was through these very valued conversations and valued relationships.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing in the relationships piece, because that is a very important part of it. And sometimes we have the opportunity to build relationship over time, and sometimes we only have minutes to try to build a relationship and a space where people can feel comfortable giving their honest feedback, right? So I love that you shared on training, giving real scenarios and examples so that we can talk about what happens if this scenario happens. I think that was a really big gem there. We talked about the appeals committee and how that is a great way to keep the feedback loop open, but also keep a pulse check on the reality of what's going on. And then obviously the relationship, and not being afraid to just pick up the phone and say, hey, like, how are things going with this? Again, keeping a good pulse on the relationship. and how things are going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to go on to the next question. What do you think?
I'm ready.
All right.
Oh, something bit me. I'm joking.
No. I was like, what? Okay, this is great because it's a good segue into what we were just talking about. What's something you've seen work well in building a culture of food safety?
This is honestly my favorite topic. I think, first of all, food safety culture does not exist on its own in a void. It only arrives once you've set up a people culture. So the oldest adage is, as a business owner, if you take care of your people will take care of your business. So I've seen this work in places, for example, a franchise organization that had a very clear succession plan on for their employees. So a shift leader knew when and what it would take for them to become a restaurant manager. A restaurant manager knew when and what it would take to become an area coach, and so on. So that gives people like validation that they're in it and they are valued as contributors. Also, if you don't train your team on anything, they're going to be left in the chaos, and that's not taking care of them. So you need to take care the time to train them. And honestly, sometimes that doesn't mean 8 hours in front of a pre-recorded screen. There's a foundation exists in video training, but lots of it, honestly, is side-by-side training. So invest in their training, invest in their coaching, invest in them asking questions, because it's okay for them to ask questions. Especially invest for people culture, but specifically for food safety culture. Why are we doing this? Why is the danger zone called the danger zone? What does washing your hands really achieve? What does rotation really achieve? What does E. coli bad? But why E. coli bad?
Yes.
I think even getting to those, explaining to people the why, the rationale of things is important. I'd say also food safety culture is easier when everything that can be embedded in normal ops becomes embedded in normal ops. And technology is our friend here. So, sensors to take temperatures.
Because I'll tell you, throwing out an entire walk-in cooler of product, a lot more expensive than maybe a monthly small nominal fee of a service that lets you know, of a piece of technology that lets you know when there is a significant drop in temperature, when something is about to go wrong,
and
before
they exist.
It goes wrong. Yeah.
Set up the sensors.
Yeah.
Let the machine tell you when something's going off.
Yeah.
And then you can tend to them. That way it kind of repositions the human with all the knowledge to take care of important stuff, notably your customers, right? So there's part of food safety culture that's there is just automate the awful.
Automate what you can.
Automate the awful. And then recognition. You can't get away from recognition being an important part of culture in general, but food safety culture in particular. And I'll give you an example of this. In one of my past jobs, I was giving a training on recognition writ large. And I said, has anyone here in this room ever felt that they were receiving too much recognition? May they raise their hand.
Yeah.
Anyone who's ever gotten to that saturation point of like, oh, my boss just like overwhelms me with no one's ever gotten there. So give it until someone says, please stop. I'm crumbling in my trophies, in my recognition cards. Yeah. So like, that's always part of it. And if I consider real life examples, I gave the one of a franchise organization earlier that had a succession plan for its team. The other one I've seen is in a food manufacturing plant right here in the GTA. And they invest in their team members, their plant workers very much. They are very proactive in helping them change their tires for the winter, for example. So they have a mobile clinic that says, this mobile clinic, while people are at work and their car is in the parking lot at work, this mobile clinic will change their tires.
Wow.
That way it is done. There's no excuse not to change to winter tires and be safer on the road. Take
Safety,
care of their families.
Not just about food safety and brand protection, but we care about safety for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just the customer, but we care about safety for you. And these are ways that we demonstrate that. I think that's a beautiful example.
At a supplier level, for this brand, there was also an assessment of the general food safety and quality assurance performance of suppliers. And there's a module in it that is specifically on food safety culture. And this plant won top marks almost every year. So we did not assess specifically, do you train or support your team members in their tire change? But there was other aspects that are more specific to the plant. They had food safety training on a periodical basis. Wasn't long, but it was a repeat. So that helps with the culture, right? Again, to realign those values. Everybody here, we value safety above everything else. Safety of the people, safety of our food. I'm
gonna interject there for a second, because I think that's where sometimes franchisors can get it wrong when they're trying to build a culture of food safety, is they only think about it at the beginning of the onboarding, or right when the restaurant maybe first opens, or once they've received an audit that says that something has gone wrong. That's when they talk about it. But you mentioned training, not just at the beginning or not just when something goes wrong, but training throughout. Can you share a little bit, maybe there's an example that you can share or a best practice you can share of how often, the cadence for it, or maybe the best way franchisors can start to embed that food safety into the culture?
I think the cadence, I'd say it needs to be hit at least once a year.
Okay.
And you can also break it up into little pieces that it's like 4 times a year, but it's not the exact same module. So you kind of just like spread it out a little bit.
I like that.
I think something that is useful is that your kind of your booster training, if you will, is not as long and tedious as the starting. No, because that insults people's intelligence, right? They're like, oh, I didn't forget. They probably forgot a lot of it. But don't make them feel like they're newbies all over again for having to do this program. So give them like, oh, this is the annual re-up. It is half as long, or like even less, just 25% as long as your original training. And then you say everyone does it. I think
that's important, because I think where you lose people sometimes is when you try to retrain them on the full, and sometimes it's, to your point earlier, 8 hours worth of modules, or if you're taking your food safety, your not smart,
your handlers,
your food handlers certifications and things, those are long modules, very detailed information, and some of it not fully applicable maybe to your environment or what you need to do. And so making it bite-sized, making it digestible, making it even a little fun and interesting, engaging, helps it stick, right?
I think also expanding on that of, honestly, you just have to make it relevant. Yeah. So if you're a franchisor organization, like let's say an umbrella corp with like many sub-brands, and one of them like is Japanese food, one of them is like more like Lebanese style food, one of them is like more Mexican style food, and you have this one generic food safety training for everybody, people are going to disengage. They're like, this has nothing to do with me.
We don't even serve anything raw, any raw shellfish or poultry here. Why are we learning about this?
Like cooked rice can be super dangerous, but I don't sell that in my restaurant. So why do I have to go through this, right? So honestly, as a franchisor, it's a little bit of pain up front, but it is so worth it for your teams to kind of go into the smaller details of what the applicability would be. If you have different formats of restaurants, like one of them that is like more dine-in focused, but you have a sister brand to it that is more takeout focused, and there is no such thing as dine-in.
Yeah.
And so like take away the modules that have to do with like bussing tables and all that stuff. People, like, you're just going to lose them.
Yeah.
So I think adaptability to your audience is important.
It's one of the number one tips I give when it comes to training. Know your audience. And it's not just about their learning style. It's about the environment that, to your point, they're working in.
And make it fun.
Yeah.
Put like really cheesy jokes in there. Because then people are going to talk about it between themselves, right? And that's like a bit of a measure of retention as well. Make it fresh. I don't want to see a training for 15 years ago. Don't you dare.
Yeah.
Shake it up every 2-3 years. Give me something new, right? So I think that's part of how to make not only just the idea of repetition work in your favor, but like of true absorption of that material. That's what's going to help.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Should we move on to another one?
I love it.
Okay. I love that. Yeah. We talk about culture a lot, I think, in franchise brands, because culture really is baked into like brand value, right? How people connect and engage with your brand. And if you are a restaurant brand and food safety isn't a part of how you talk about your culture, I think this is your sign to go back, talk to your leaders about it, talk to your operations folks about it, your field reps, your franchisees. Talk to me about our food safety culture, or how we approach food safety in our restaurants. And I think we'd learn a lot. They'd learn a lot from those conversations.
Yeah.
And so thank you for bringing in some real applicable, actionable ways to embed that into the culture.
Yeah. And part of food safety professionals, like a leader like me's job, is to think ahead to the worst scenario.
Yeah.
And that can be destabilizing for some people. So like that is like, a very well brewed, courageous conversation right there. As a good example, for example, is what's going on with our delivery trucks, right? Mm-hmm. Are they locked? Are they monitored? And, I had a conversation with one of our suppliers once, and I said, are they locked? They're like, no, but it goes straight from the plant to this restaurant and the other restaurant, the third restaurant. That's it. I'm like, what do you mean that's it? Well, that's it. I'm like, okay, but what happens? Like, if at this restaurant, the 15 minutes that this door is open while the driver is doing the delivery, someone gets in and steals stuff or alters the stuff. And yes, the risk of that happening is very small, but it can, right? Especially if you're a brand that is, I don't know, let's say recently controversial for all sorts of reasons that I can't even think of right now. Someone might want to retaliate against you and get in your truck and like,
listen, when you're in that number one spot, you have the target on your back sometimes,
correct.
Right?
And people might mean you harm. So you have to think ahead to that worst scenarios. And I know of a brand that I will not name that they had a big food safety crisis. Like, this is a retail restaurant franchise brand, big food safety crisis about 10 years ago. And turns out for like about 1,000 locations they had in Canada and the US, they did not have a food safety team. The food safety format was largely on the shoulders of operations, who did their best, but there was no one kind of speaking straight up to management and saying, we have a blind spot here. And then they got their blind spot served to them really publicly. And it took like 3-4 years for them to recover.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's when they do recover, because some brands never recover. And I mean, especially when there's loss of life and things
Which
like
there
that.
was.
Yeah. Anyway, I know we already picked another question, but I think we could talk about culture all day long, because it's why we show up.
Yeah.
It's and how we show up, right? Okay. This is a good one, because, I like talking
None
about
of them
training.
are bad ones.
What's the best way? I know there's a lot of ways, but what's the best way to make food safety training stick with franchisees and their teams? And I know we just kind of touched on it, but if you had to only give one tip, what would that be?
How to make it stick.
Yeah.
Only one tip.
Yeah.
I would have to say that, again, it's repetition. You have to build a format where repetition happens. So even if you have a food safety training that is maybe not as deep and thorough as someone like me would prefer, at least if there's a system of repetition in place, it pops up once a year or every 3 months in a certain format. There's governance around the cascade of like franchisor asks franchisee to do this, and franchisee cascades to market coach, to area coach, to restaurant teams. If there's governance on that curriculum, that is like the best way to have continuity on this program.
I love that you didn't just say the franchisor has to connect with the franchisee. You literally just layered it through the organization. And I think that's an important part to point out. It's not just talking about it with your franchisees, but internally, in your internal teams, are you building a culture of food safety? Do your managers, your directors, your suppliers also know that there's a value of food safety here? There's a culture of food safety here. And I like that you brought that up because one of my clients reached out to me once and said, Maliesa, I have this scenario. I don't know what to do about it because it feels a little icky and weird. But so I feel like I have to say something, but I don't know. I don't know how to do it. And I was like, okay, talk me through it. She was in a restaurant, and these days restaurant kitchens are a little bit more open concept than they maybe were, 20 years ago. And there's some benefit to that, but I mean, it also gives a lot more visibility to what's going on. And sometimes you end up seeing things that you probably shouldn't see. But she went in as a customer and she worked with this brand. And so it was her day off. She was just going in for a drink. And she placed her order and stepped aside and was observing this team member who was by themselves, line up to the door, doing their very best to take orders and make drinks. And she observed this team member take one of the blenders that they use and just spray it down quickly with water before making her drink. And I was like, because that's not clean.
Nope.
It's a rinse. And I said, what did you do? And she's like, I kind of froze. A part of me wanted to say something in the moment. A part of me wanted to maybe this was over a weekend, so maybe contact the business coach that oversaw the store and give the feedback. She could have also filled out a Google review as a customer. She could have done a lot of things. And I said, what did you do? And she's like, I did nothing.
None of those options.
I took the drink that I just paid $12 for. I walked outside and I just threw it in the garbage. And that's why she was having this internal battle.
So days later, she was still thinking about it.
She was still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, the question now is why? Why have you not said anything? Why have you not done anything? And she said, well, I mean, we had a couple more questions to go through, but eventually it came out that the reason she didn't say anything and the reason she was nervous to say anything was because the person that she would have had to give that feedback to, which would have been the business coach or the area coach, they didn't have a really great relationship. And in the past, when she had given feedback from visiting restaurants, this person had become very defensive, had taken it very personally, had even gone to other colleagues and said, oh, she was in my store. Like, if she's just a customer, she'd just be a customer. And so there was this tension and weirdness between them, so much so that she was there now grappling with how to say something. Yeah. And it was, we eventually worked through it. And, I'm like, what's more uncomfortable? Hanging on to this feeling of feeling like you're not living in alignment with your values, or addressing the thing? Like, what's, the short-term pain sometimes for the long-term gain, right? So we ended up, working through it, and we practiced kind of how we were going to deliver this message. How did you do it before? What was the reaction? What can we maybe change or make different this time? And eventually she ended up speaking to him and getting the issue resolved and following up with the franchise partner. But I share that story and I share that example because of a couple things. One, there is no faster way to cripple your brand from, let me rewind. There's no faster way to cripple a brand than when it implodes from the inside. When the people who have the closest look at the things.
Middle management apathy. Yeah, that is like.
Is that the word for it? The term?
That's what I'm just calling it. That's what I'm. Yeah.
It is so critically important to not just focus on bringing that culture to life in the restaurants with the franchisees. You have to do it internally. You have to practice what those conversations look like. We want you to point out, these are the steps that you should take if you are in one of our restaurants and you see something, right? And we will have your back.
And practice makes perfect on this, right? So it might take a few rounds of this type of feedback before the person on the other side feels more comfortable receiving it or looks more comfortable receiving it. I agree. I always think of, if I don't raise this, who will, right? Or I don't, for example, if that restaurant in a week later was shut down for like gross malpractice or something like that.
Maybe there was a health inspector in line watching the whole thing.
Unfold. And your customers, everyone has a smartphone. They're going to pull it out. They're like, excuse me, what's going on here?
If somebody recorded secretly. Yeah. Absolutely.
So do you want to be in a situation where like, I was seeing this go sideways a week before this restaurant got shut down and I did nothing, right? If you care about your brand, you're going to speak it up. And if your corporate organization, your franchisor cares about their brand, they're going to welcome that feedback. Yes. That feedback is precious, right? And so you kind of have to get over that discomfort to say it. I do understand how having a previous history of feedback not going well definitely raise the mountain of friction to like decide if you're going to do it or not, right? It's also like rinsing a pitcher is not sufficient, but if that person had only seen like, let's say 10 rats, like then that might have felt more imminent or more scary or more dangerous, and that might have conquered that mountain greater. Yeah. So people are like modulating this in their head. They have their own algorithms, right? Like the problem versus
is it that serious?
Yes,
or can it kind of slide?
The mountain, the problem, the gravity of the problem versus the mountain to declare it. There's an algorithm and everyone's head is different about where that comfort is. But I think courageous conversations is a full culture thing. It's not just one person to another. So if an organization signals that it welcomes these and it wants these, then the bar to raise these problems and get to the solution is much easier.
Yeah. And I know from experience and from previous conversations with you that you find yourself in those scenarios sometimes where you're having to have a conversation with someone who there's been tension in the past, there's been misunderstanding, there's been feedback that's been taken very personally or sometimes just completely out of context. How do you as a leader move past that, move through that, and still find it in you to do the right thing?
So back to the concept of the relationship, right? I want to understand that person's point of view. So have to start going in with an open heart. And often that also means that there's a time component to it, right? There's a fair amount of conversations I've had with more like franchisee leaders that they were disappointed, upset, confused about something that happened. Mostly in an audit is what will trigger this. And then they will tell me the whole story, like this is what happened, then this employee did this, and then this other employee did this, and then this happened. Like they're like
Yeah.
it's a step by step. It takes 30 minutes for them to explain it. And the outcome honestly remains the same. Whatever decision was made by the auditor was the correct one of food being left at room temperature that shouldn't have for too long. A situation where hand washing should have occurred but did not.
Mm-hmm.
But I gave the grace to that franchisee leader to explain it to me, right? I validated that his point of view mattered to me, right? That his lived experience was important. He could express it and I was going to receive it. And sometimes then we kind of workshopped a way to do better in the future, like how to train your team, how to explain it.
Comes back to training.
Yeah, it's also, there's many times also I offered to area coaches, like if someone asks you a tricky question, like, okay, but why are cockroaches bad? And you're not sure exactly how to handle it, call me. Yeah. I will load you up with that information. You're going to feel so confident explaining it afterwards.
People. Yeah.
So getting on the other side of a tough conversation and kind of like moving on or getting still something good out of it, I think it starts with respecting the human for what they are, right? They're a business leader. They want their business to work. They don't want their employees to be confused, disengaged, frustrated. And so, sometimes also I've had to do what I consider coaching of those leaders of saying, if all your team members are working with a difficult piece of equipment, right? Like this walk-in cooler, everyone's wonky. Don't put the blame on them. This is your equipment, right? So if you want them to not have this bother on the top of their heads, get this thing repaired or get it replaced.
Root cause.
Yes.
Because even replaying the scenario that client shared with me, the first thing she said was that team member was by himself and he had a lineup out the door.
Yeah.
So he might know it's important for me to wash this with soap and sanitize it and leave it in the sanitizer for a certain amount of time. The question is, why were they by themselves during a peak period? The other one is, why don't you have enough blenders so that maybe they don't have to, is that the reason maybe why? Correct. Right?
Yeah.
And so maybe there was somebody on break. Maybe someone was coming in a little bit later. I don't know. I was only, that person was only there for a few minutes, 15 minutes. But you should start asking those questions. So even from, again, a training perspective, when you receive that feedback, when somebody says to you, hey, this is what I observed, it shouldn't necessarily always just be pick up the phone and let the person have it. It's being curious, being inquisitive, asking the questions, and giving the space for them to explain, to give context, so that you can, again, go back to root cause.
Yeah. And moreover here, like the values part would have been important, right?
Yeah.
So when push comes to shove, when the other person on staff, they went on break and you don't have enough blenders perhaps, how do you just communicate that to your customer? You're like, I'm sorry, so just give me a moment. I want to wash the blender and give you
no customer is going to say, don't wash that blender.
Because more and more that happens, that the employee is both the cashier and the food prepper.
Yes.
That happens often. A lot. And, you can't plan your micro peaks accordingly.
Always,
So you kind of have to be ready to say that, this is the continuation of our values. Like, no matter what, you will always get a safe drink. And if you have to wait 90 seconds longer to get it, this is, we feel good about this as a company, that this is the choice we're making.
Amazing. I love that we brought it kind of back to yes, training, yes, root cause, relationship, courageous conversations. But again, with the training, it's not just what is food safety risk, but why is it important? Why do we value it?
Yes.
What happens if you find yourself in this scenario? Scenario-based training is great, I think, for this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way, and being available, I think, also as a leader to say, hey, if there is a challenge, an issue, a concern, pick up the phone and call me. And if I don't have the answer, I will surely find it for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I want to make sure we at least get to our Okay. Next question. Okay. Great last question, because it doesn't matter how many steps you take. Sometimes things happen. So if a food safety crisis hits, what's the first step leaders should take?
So, honestly, if a food safety crisis hits and no preparation has ever been done before the crisis, you're already starting 10 steps backward.
Say it again for the people.
If a food safety crisis hits and there's been no preparation done ahead of time, you are starting 10 steps backwards.
Yes.
So you need preparation before. Think of fire drills at school. It is because in a rush, you want to have already embedded the reflex of like leave this room, go down this staircase and go outside this door, meet all the way over there at the muster point, right? So the first steps honestly starts at -3, right?
Yeah.
You need to start with like, what's a crisis plan? What's in it? Who says what when? But once it hits, the first step is communication right away. And sometimes communication can be incomplete in that first set, right? I remember a couple of years ago, I had, there was an onion situation. It wasn't a recall yet. It was just, I think at the time it was the CFIA saying, we are investigating onions that make people sick. Which onions? Yellow, white, red?
Purple,
don't know.
Whatever.
Where? Which part of the country? They didn't specify that. They just were investigating. So, and then everyone is scared of their onions.
Yes.
So,
another reason onions make you cry.
so my next step was just my first communication was like, hello, franchisees. Also, hello, my leadership team.
Yes.
I'm aware of this. I'm looking into it. More information to come soon. So it basically said also, don't change anything for now. Within 6 hours, it was, don't use onions anymore. Put the ones that you've prepared in the garbage. The ones that you haven't chopped up, keep them in your cold room for now. Instructions to follow. So don't wait until you know everything until you give information. So that's, as the crisis leader, food safety people are often the crisis leaders in restaurant situations. I think even small, clear information, timely, is more important than the full picture. As scientists, that makes us really uncomfortable because we like to propose like an entire like story, like
with all the technical terms.
Yeah, A
too.
plus B equals C and all that stuff. But as a franchisee, I think what's also important is to heed those communications, escalate if you've heard anything different, because sometimes that's how we get to know things. It shouldn't, but sometimes it happens. But that's why it's important to put that first communication out.
Yes.
I'm aware. That way I don't receive 50 emails from franchisees saying, I saw this on the news. So otherwise afterwards is cascade the information. We've been advised by the franchisor that there's this going on. For now, no change. Right? You, the franchisee, are reassured by my communication.
Yes.
Cascade down. Right?
Yes.
That way, because within 30 minutes, your cashier might get a question about this.
From a customer even.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And so they need to be able to answer it.
Yeah.
And then when we say, we're not selling onions right now, we don't know if it's part of a real call or not. Just don't.
Yes.
And then with like a quick till script, cascade down quickly, verify that they know, right?
Yes.
That's it. Set up, if you haven't yet, set up some sort of WhatsApp or Teams group with the next rung, right? So like if you're a franchise owner with your regional coaches, if you're regional coaches with your market coaches, and like each rung of your hierarchy, have that group in a communication app that will let you have access to them in like a fraction of a second. And because we know our ops people, they're on the road. They're not like looking at their emails and stuff like that.
They shouldn't be when they're driving.
Certainly not. But even in the restaurant, they're busy coaching, training, answering questions. So like, there needs to be like a pre-programmed group for people to talk about it.
Yes.
And it is expected of like, okay, this is a messaging app you never turn off.
Yes.
All the other ones you can, but this one, no, because this is where like emergency communication come through. So that goes back to preparation, like a few steps earlier of like, what are the steps? Yeah. What are the communication channels you're going to get information through? Because I've had this in my experience where a supplier, for some reason, reached out directly to my restaurants to tell them there was a recall on something, did not tell me. Actually, it was a quality withdrawal, but just for
still
semantics.
The communication skipped the franchisor and went straight to the franchisee,
which was completely out of process between me and that supplier, and between me and all my suppliers. And you know what the restaurants reacted? They thought it was a hoax.
Yeah.
They're like, this fraudulent. Is new.
Yeah.
They're like,
how come we haven't heard from head office then?
Like the CRA calls, you know? Like it's So because of that, because you already have a system in place of like, first of all, honestly, one of the first point in crisis preparation is just acknowledging crisis will happen. Yeah. Some people just can't even get to accepting those will. So if you just start with crises will happen, but if we're prepared, there'll be fewer of them and they will be of less intensity. And then you decide who's part of the crisis team. You decide where the crisis communications will come from. Yeah. And then you prepare who the recipients are of like, you will only receive these from me, but when you do, you must take act. And some of them, obviously, requires a feedback loop of how many quantities of this and that and all that stuff.
I love that you shared on not just preparing, identifying, talking about the processes in place, but how important that communication is. And the reality is operations, whether you're an operations leader or a QA, specialist or expert or scientist, it doesn't make you a communications expert. And so sometimes you do have to lean on communications experts who have that knowledge, who have that experience to help you put together the words, to help you put together the timing, to help you put together those templates that might need to happen, especially when media can get involved, right? And like, no comment is still a comment. So it just kind of, I think, highlights the importance that communication plays in identifying and preparing for and responding to a food safety crisis. So thank you for bringing that part in and layering that part in. It's a critical piece to the puzzle.
With so an effective crisis team at franchisor level will have several people of different departments on hand that they've already been selected for this. They know that when the crisis hits, this takes precedence over anything else. So I know that each time I needed to put out communication, I had it vetted by, for example, one of my ops peers to confirm, have I considered everything, right? I mentioned at the beginning, I've done ops. I've been in food safety for like almost 20 years. So that means I've been in ops a lot because I wanted to serve food safety and it lives in ops, believe it or not. So I still ask my ops friends, like, have I forgotten something? Is there something about the cashier? Is there something about the POS? Is there something about an overhead menu board, that we need to block out, that we need to get into these details about telling restaurant teams exactly what to do? I always have it revised. And almost every time I had missed something. Yeah. So it's always there for that. I think also pre-crisis, something useful to have, like a really pro tip is on your crisis committee, have a franchisee rep there. And then you can talk about, is this the right way to talk to your teams? Is this the right protocol? Yes. Yeah. And, sometimes some crisis protocols are 10 years old, but we don't, honestly, robocalls, we don't do that anymore. It's a different way, right? So you need to adapt. And having a franchisee rep there will tell you exactly if you're missing the mark on what you intend to communicate.
Yeah. Thank you for including the franchisee. I know we have to wrap up. Thank you for including the franchisee in the feedback loop, because I remember there was an ops director that had reached out and I was, giving some feedback, and it's like, you always somehow find the little mistakes that we miss, you know? And I said, I wish I could take all the credit, sir. 90% of what I communicate up comes from conversations I'm having with franchisees when I'm in store, or managers or team members when I'm in store that say, hey, that new promotion came out, but did you notice? Or, hey, we received this email. Is it fraudulent? Is it, factual? Like, what should we do here? And I'm just like, I wasn't copied on that email. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So a lot of times that feedback does come from franchisees, and I hope that more franchisors will sit the ego down and open themselves up to hearing, even when it's hard, that feedback from franchisees. Yeah.
It is invaluable expertise. Why would you not tap into it?
Yeah. They're living it. They're living it day in and day out, right? Right. Oh, thank you. So much good information, a lot of tips. I feel like this conversation included a lot of actionable examples and actionable tips that people can take back to really start embedding food safety into brand culture and making it alive, not just in their restaurants, but also within their internal teams.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of those insights. We want to make sure that if people do want to get in touch with you, Kat, that they have your information. So look over there and tell people how to get in contact with you if they have questions or want your expertise.
Best way is to hit my LinkedIn page. My name is Catherine Bedard, and that will be the best way to get in touch with me. Please do what's right. Take care of your communities, keep them safe, and then you'll have customers forever.
Amazing. Well, that's all we have time for today, folks. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Hot Perspectives, the show. And as always, if you have any topics or questions you want to explore, drop it in the comments. If you enjoyed the conversation and are curious to learn more about franchising, like, follow, share, and subscribe to the channel.